Welcome to episode 40 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, we chat with Oscar Ugaz about his time at Real Madrid and what's next in the world of sports digital in Europe. We have a quick chat to Olympian and silver medalist Dave Morris.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for the sports digital marketer. And now, here's your host, who suggests you should really rethink that bad password, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. That's right, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and welcome to episode 40. We've made it to the big 40. Thank you for everyone who has listened from the get-go, and if you're just new and checking out the back catalogue, thank you for joining us. This week on the podcast, I chat with a good friend of mine, Oscar Ugaz, who works in digital marketing in Europe. He's in France at the moment, and we talk about his time when he was working with Real Madrid and some of the things they did there, and also some of the trends that he is spotting in the world of sports digital, not only in Europe, but also in Latin America. We talk about topics like connected stadium and why YouTube is ready to disrupt the world of sports. And also a little bit of a sneak peek. We're lucky enough to chat with Winter Olympian and overall good bloke David Morris. Recently came back from Sochi winning a silver medal in the aerial skiing. We chatted with him on Beers, Blokes and Business. That's going to come out tomorrow on Monday. So we'll have a little bit of a snippet of that episode where we talk about social media and the reaction from fans and how he dealt with it. Don't forget the Sports Geek One Day Educational is now out. You can check that out at sportsgeekhq.com/ODE. Stay tuned for some more info on that later in the podcast, where I'm going to give you a special promo code. But first, here's my chat with Oscar Ugaz from France. Very pleased to welcome onto the Sports Geek podcast. I caught up with him a couple of years ago via Skype before I had a podcast, so I'm really happy to have him on. Oscar Ugaz is in, I think I've got him in France today. Oscar, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
And you are in France today?
Yes, today we are in a winter day in France. Very, very nice.
So, first of all, just to introduce yourself to the listeners, if people, if they follow Sports Biz on Twitter or Digisport, they might have seen your Twitter handle, Oscar Ugaz, pop up every now and again. But do you want to give everyone a little bit of a background of your story in sports and digital?
No, yes, of course. I have an experience of 15 years in digital. I am a former advertising executive working for Wunderman. I am still working with them. But in 2007, I was hired by Real Madrid to be digital business manager. I worked with them several years, establishing the digital strategy that nowadays the club have in place. So from that point on, I have been in the sports sphere, and I have been working and advising other sports organizations since I left the club.
So it must have been a really exciting phase, because you're really in that spot where, around the same time, I started Sports Geek a little bit after that, but it was really around the time that social networks really developed, like Facebook came along and Twitter came along and sports teams started to adapt that. Were there some real lessons in those early years and moving from a pure digital to what we now know as the social media?
No, yes, indeed. We are talking about 2007. In 2007, where Facebook and Twitter they are not the size that they are nowadays. They are not as well known as they are nowadays. And in that time, also, for example, Real Madrid, the case that I work on, Real Madrid has not developed a big digital strategy. They have their portal, and they have made some specific, very, very specific and little efforts in mobile. And when we start to develop this new strategy of them, well, the first thing we do is the website and stuff like that. But in some moment we say, we are in 2007, and there are these new behaviors in people. People are using this new platform, this new social media. People is engaging, people is talking. Why we don't enter in that sphere? And there was also always a fear, and it's still a fear that is in most sport organizations and in some brands of we don't want to get there because we are afraid of losing control and stuff like that. But after a discussion, and we insist, and we convince them, and we start to have a presence in Facebook and in Twitter, just like a test. At the beginning, it was a test to see how fans behave in these environments when they can speak and have an opinion. And then we will see if we can translate that to our website, our official web portals. And at the end of the day, that social media and that social media environments became a big monster on their own, and they have their own life. And then we decided to start creating strategies and created specific efforts and a specific business around these social media environments.
And so, I mean, you've moved on from Real now, and you're in a consulting business working in digital marketing. How much of your work now are you still, in the sports space?
Yes. No, nowadays, I work in Latin America and in Europe. Let's say that around 50% of the job right now that I am doing is related to sports. We are working with some sports clubs in Latin America, and we are also advising some organizations in Germany and also in Spain. But it's 50% of our job right now. But it's most of the same. It's based on digital and how these organizations can take advantage out of these new platforms and these new solutions.
And so how has the transition for you been different, go from, what we would call clubland and working for a team and, and just for their purposes, to one, being in the same space as me, working with multiple teams, but then also working with these multiple industries or brands and, in governments and those kind of things? How much of that digital strategy and the work that you're doing in digital is applicable and transferable across those industries?
I think that it's many things are very transferable, because, for example, related to sports, at the end of the day, it's a business. You need to develop some type of value. It's obvious that you need that. But at the end of the day, all the things nowadays in digital are based in content. It doesn't matter if you are selling sports, if you are selling a country, a tourist destination, or a car, as I am working in all these industries. What you need in all of these situations is content. If you don't have relevant and remarkable content, it's very difficult to have an impact in digital or in social media, because nowadays, it's a word that everyone is using. It's content, but it's real. If you don't have nowadays something interesting to tell in the digital sphere, you have nothing, because you are not having attention, and without attention, you are not going to be able to transform that in eventual sales or in eventual value to the company. So that's a problem that you confront in any business that you are nowadays, that if you want to activate it in digital. So I think that the experience that we have in a brand like Real, that is very big and have all the attention, but in some way have big difficulties to create content beyond the football match, because you have the football match, it's big content, but this content is already being sold to the tenant of the rights, So it's the guy that is paying you the big amounts of broadcast rights. You say, okay, how I can create more content, something different to try to bring more attention and try to transform that new attention in money, because how I create additional business out of this social media. That's the same problem that, for example, tourist boards or car dealers or whoever you think have the same content and the same content problem.
And definitely, over the last 3 to 4 years, that explosion of content has just happened across the board. I mean, sports teams, are overflowing with content, but still you've got to shape that content for your fans in a way that they can consume it, because all sports teams, whether they be Real Madrid or the Melbourne Storm or the LA Lakers, they're competing against these other content engines and content companies that are now coming up and competing with sports teams, whether they be, USA for the Win or Grantland.com or anything like that. The sports teams can't just be putting out the vanilla match report or the press conference. They've got to be in that, like you just said, remarkable and interesting content to engage their fans. Otherwise, the fans just start tuning out.
Yeah. That's very true. The problem is that there are. I am talking about football clubs in Europe and in Latin America. These people have very big difficulties to create relevant and remarkable content. I am not talking about the States, for example, because in the States they have been very creative and they are willing to test new stuff. But in European football and in Latin America, beyond the match, the highlights, the training footage or stuff like that, there are very, very few examples of people creating some content thinking out of the box. I think that one of the very great and big examples are Manchester City, for example. Manchester City is a club that is creating concepts like the tunnel cam, or are creating concepts that, okay, we are going to play a training match using GoPro cameras and stuff like that. They are guys that are, I think that because they are not in the front lines, they are not the first and the biggest and the most popular football club in the Premier or I don't know, it's important, but they don't have nothing to lose. They say, okay, we are going to test things, and that is the attitude. That's the attitude that you have to take. And I think that they are doing pretty well.
Well, we've definitely seen, I guess, an insatiable appetite for sports fans, definitely here in Australia and the same in the States, in the US, and the pro teams in the more content that teams produce. And we've seen it as digital teams have grown. They've gone from 1 to 2 person man teams. As they put in more content producers, that the numbers, the traffic, it all increases because the fans have this insatiable desire. So, I mean, from what you're saying, to me, that sounds like there's a massive opportunity for all the teams to produce, to follow the leads of the Manchester Cities to produce that extra content, because their fans are craving for it. They just don't know that if the opportunity was there, if that content was produced for them, that they would be consuming that more and more.
Yeah, no, but there is also a big constraint there. Okay, it's not only based in the resources you have that put inside a club more producers and more budget to create that. It's also a thing about attitude and about conceptual openness to do this type of task, because most of the content created by the club is created by press areas that are very traditional in the way that they manage. The guys that, for example, are creating outstanding and incredible content, for example, around football and around in YouTube, for example, and is driving millions of fans, are people that are not are not football clubs. Are the guys, for example, of Copa 90. I don't know if you know them. It's the guys that are creating relevant content. They are creating concepts like the football fan, the Euro fan, the guys that goes around the games and show you the behind the scenes or the bowels of the club, or the guys who make fans and make rap battles between Ronaldo and Messi and stuff like that. And this is driving huge amounts of traffic and attention, But that is an arena in which a football club is very difficult to enter. Not only because they are traditional, it's also because they have, we have to protect the image of the players, we have to protect this image of this and the others, and you have a lot of constraints. But that's why you sometimes are forced to not create so relevant and interesting content, But that is a barrier that in some moment it needs to break it down, because if not, all the traffic is going to go to these other creative types, that are creating the content that people nowadays is following.
Another question that I'm really looking forward to when I'm in Europe is checking out some of the stadiums and seeing what the trends are at stadiums both in London and in Europe. There's a really big debate in the US at the minute around connected stadiums. As you know, I'm part of Seek Conference and I run the digital track, and they're always talking about Wi-Fi and DAS and can the fans get access to the internet, and it's becoming a necessity in the States. And we've also got some Cisco rolling out some networks with some of the major stadiums in Australia because of the demands that so many fans with smartphones want to be able to do things. But there's been an interesting, opposing points of view. Mark Cuban, the owner of the Mavericks, is really in the camp of, I don't want my fans using their phones. I want them to be engaged with the action. And then you've got the new Kings owner who wants to provide that fan as much internet as they need so they can have that extra contextual benefit of being at the game, and it might be live replays that you can pull up on your smartphone. So they're the two sort of opposite ends of the spectrum that's currently happening in the US. What's the connected stadium debate like happening in Europe and Latin America?
I think that well, in Latin America, they're still not in that level of connected stadiums. In Europe, there are many teams that are entering in this environment. Not because they are, I think, not because they are thinking in a strategic way like in the States, but most because other ones are doing. That's the bad thing about all this digital. Oh, because my competitor is doing, I am going to do it also, because I cannot say that I am not a connected stadium and the team that I fight every Sunday, the other team have it. That's the situation right now. I think that both Mr. Cuban and the people that are opposite to Mr. Cuban in these things are both right. I think that in the States you have this big problem of people saying, why I go to the match, to the stadium, if I can sit in my couch, in my armchair, and I have my big plasma screen with my tablet and all the things, and I have all the information there, So you have to give them reasons to go to the stadium. Some of the reasons is you are going to have the same connectivity and you are going to use the same multimedia options in the stadium. Come on here. On the other hand, I think that Mr. Cuban is very right. The thing that you cannot do is go there to the stadium, and I think that is happening in some stadiums in the States. That you go to the stadium and you sit down in a very big room, like your house, and you sit down there and you pass all the time watching at the games, but also watching what is happening in other 4 or 5 games at the same time, playing fantasy games, because at the end of the day, well, that is not the experience of a match. I think that both are extremes, that you cannot fall in one extreme and the other because it's not healthy. The other thing that I think about connected stadiums is that it's great. You have to provide this content to the fans, these services. But I think that is something that is very expensive, and if the football clubs have not a good strategy how to extract money out of it or how to extract value, and believe me, many clubs don't have them, at least in Europe, it's going to be a very big and expensive, nice to have thing, I think that if you want to extract value out of a connected stadium, the first things that you have is a very compelling and very well-established CRM strategy. To know, okay, these guys came in, they buy this thing, I can put that in a database, I can have all this information, I can see how I can extract insights and information, and I can create new products to sell these guys. Because it's just, no, okay, I have it, it's very nice, but it's very expensive, but well, I have connect Wi-Fi in the stadium, is not make any sense. There are football teams, for example, in Europe that these are projects that are developed by the IT department of the club. But for example, the guys on sponsorship don't know how to extract value out of that. They don't have the tools to say, okay, how can I use this internet connection inside the stadium to maybe sell some new products to the sponsor, So it's part of the silo culture of many clubs in Europe. IT is one area and it's totally separated for sponsorship and it's totally separated for digital marketing. They work separated. They don't talk to each other. One of these projects is a totally technical IT project. Yeah. The other guys know how to activate it. So that is also some of the other big constraints about this.
Definitely, it is something that even the first time I went to see it in 2011, it was all the IT guys, and that was one of my first conversations with Christine after that to say we really need to get the marketers in here and at the same conference, because the IT guys will set up the great systems, but it's the marketing guys that will implement these activations and sponsorships that connect that close the loop. And last year,
that is not happening right now.
Yeah,
unfortunately, that is not happening. And from my experience, that is not happening right now.
Yeah, so last year in Kansas City, the guys at Sporting KC and Sporting Innovations pretty much used Sporting Park, where Sporting KC play, as a really good example of what a connected stadium can be, in that their smartphone app would connect to their Wi-Fi as you walked around the stadium, different offers would come to your phone because they knew where you were in the stadium. I think there was a shot on goal, and literally by the time I'd taken the phone out of my pocket and brought it up, I was able to see a replay of that. Now, they are in a really great situation, and I've got to get a sim from Sporting Innovations on the podcast to talk about it, but it is that end-to-end solution, and there's so many moving parts of getting the TV guys to work with your digital, getting the infrastructure of the stadium. But when it does come off, it does fit really well for their fan, and that's the end. But the other thing is, with the Sporting KC model, it was all connected to their CRM, so they were always getting more data about their fan to better serve that fan, better offers, better deals, those kind of things, while always profiling those fans.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you have to envision some type of return, because we are talking about very, very expensive investment to create this infrastructure. So who is going to pay for that party? Someone needs to pay for that. Maybe it's a sponsor, okay, but the sponsor will need to have options and need to have tools to activate that. Okay, I am going to sponsor and I am going to pay for this. How I am going to obtain return? And it's something that needs to be very clear. I think that very few people is making that exercise nowadays in sport properties. They are just implementing the infrastructure because everyone is doing it. And it's something that is very, 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 very sad to happen. Mm-hmm.
And so that does, does take you to that ROI question. We've all been playing, I don't want to say playing, but working in social for a couple of years now, and that ROI question keeps coming up. I mean, I think I think social overall is a longer game, and you can measure the ROI on a campaign by campaign basis and running specific things, and that's how you can start measuring ROI. But what are some of the things that you look for when someone says we want to run this campaign, but how do we make sure it brings in returns?
I think that one of the things that you need to focus here is how is you going to measure value, okay, when you create these campaigns. If, for example, it's a sponsor campaign and a sponsor say, okay, I'm going to measure my values in, I don't know, likes or comments. Well, it's his problem. I think that is the most superficial thing that you can do. I think that you have to create experiences for the fans, but that have a revenue stream behind that. That's the thing that happens when we create, for example, in Madrid, in Real Madrid, the Real Madrid Fantasy Manager. We say, okay, we have all these millions of fans in Facebook, and we have all these thousands of guys that are using our mobile application. What is people in 2010? What is people is doing nowadays in social and in social platforms and in mobile? Okay, they are playing Farmville.
Yep.
Okay, and they are playing Mafia Wars. We are talking about 2010, and
yep.
Sinca was very popular. We say, okay, if we have this, why we don't create a game, social media game? And the thing that we do is that as we act as normal licensing guys, we go and we talk with Sinca, and they say to us, we are not interested because we are focused in our own games. So we decided, and we make a complete reverse engineering of that game. We sit down with a developer of games that have experience creating fantasy games, and we, together with the guys with these guys, make a reverse engineering of these Mafia Wars, of this Farmville, and we mix that with a social media game, and we create a Fantasy Manager, a game that has been very popular and that it has demonstrated that we can extract that the Real can extract money out of that fan base, okay? Because we start bringing money, real money, out of that thing.
I mean,
the thing is, so that is something that, but not in any other clubs. You have people that is in the capacity to sit down, make that exercise, and make that reverse engineering of a game. Because at the end of the day, you're saying, no, you are digital guys. What you need to do is try to close licenses. So you have to think in some other way. You have to think in some other way. At the end of the day, also, this Fantasy Manager game nowadays is played by other 30 teams around the world. And, because Real create that game, we, the team of Digital, create that game, Real earns a royalty for each one of these games. If you are playing a game, for example, the AC Milan fantasy game, and you are making money out of that, a percentage of that money that this AC Milan is making goes to Real, because Real was the creator of the game. So Real Madrid transformed themselves into a publishers of games. Who says that the football clubs needs to be a publisher of games? Why not? Why not?
And that's we have seen that with Major League Baseball, Advanced Media. A lot of teams and leagues are setting up their own digital media departments, both as a content producing house, but then also spinning off and doing those sort of games and fantasy games and those kind of things, because it is focused on revenue. Fantasy is still one of the biggest traffic drivers on a lot of sports. So there's money to be made from an advertising point of view, having premium versions. I know I've heard Peter Stringer talk about similarly their 3-Point Play Facebook app around the same time. Was a really great way, early on when those games on Facebook were starting to really catch on. It really worked really well, tied into their CRM strategy perfectly.
Yeah. But you are thinking there. You are thinking out of the box. For example, the other example is the online video. We arrived to Madrid. They say we are the only football club that we don't have a paying online video channel. We are the only club that we don't have it. Why we don't make it? And we start making all the analysis, and you discover we lose money. We lose money because we are asking all the other people, all the other clubs that have this type of solutions, and they say, people nowadays is pirating the content. So we are losing money, and we say we don't have the content. We are not going to have the possibility to create this channel. We are going to lose money. And what happened? It was 2010. Appears YouTube with the YouTube partner program. You can upload your content, and what you do, you start selling. YouTube starts selling advertising over the content that you create. And what happened? 50% is for you, or 50% is for YouTube. But the most interesting thing is that YouTube have this technology that allows you to say, if someone is using your content, let's say that I, football club, upload my match, and I don't publish it, it's on YouTube. It's there, But if a guy take that match, they take at least 5 seconds and use it to make, I don't know what, a resume of the best goals, and the system identify that he is using 5 seconds of my content, they say, okay, this is the content of this club, of Real. And Real, you have two options. You can say, okay, block it, or you can say, sell advertising, and I want to have the 50%. So at the end of the day, you are using this great technology of YouTube not to fight with the fans, because the fans want to take the content, want to take the matches, want to take the interview, want to make the goals, and we want to make mashups. You say, okay, do the mashups. I am not going to fight with you because it's impossible to fight with thousands of guys. Do it, you are free, but in the meantime, I'm going to make money out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a big believer. I think YouTube will become a bigger player in sports. They had a very successful campaign with the IPL to doing that, and it is rumored that they may try to get some of the NFL, which would be a really big reach. But yeah, the fact that it's a platform that works, it's a platform that everyone is consuming their video on, and yes, that the ID matching ability that they've got. We went through the same when we launched the Lego car video, and it pretty much says, oh, yep, we found another video that someone stole it, and yeah, you have that option to turn it to get it shut down and send everyone back to your site, or leave it out there and let the fans consume it. And I think it's a really progressive way of thinking about it. And why wouldn't you want to monetize your content on all these different ways?
No, and the thing that you have just said is very, very important, because indeed, maybe in the future, YouTube is going to be a potential tenant of rights. He's going to be a bidder of the rights, okay? And there is the opportunity of, there is when you are going to obtain the revenue, because if YouTube, let's say in 5 years, came to a football club and say, okay, I want to buy your rights, and it say, okay, I'm going to pay you 10, and you are going to be maybe in the position to take, no, that's the value of that is not 10, the value of that is 15, and YouTube are going to ask you, and how you know that? And you're going to say, I know that because since 5 years ago, I am in your platform and I know the real value of that.
Yep.
That's the moment when all these efforts in digital is going to pay off. It's not going to pay now, It's the same thing that happened with Real, for example. 5 years ago, Real started doing all these social media platforms, and one of the guys that entered more in this type of thing was Bwin, because Bwin is a company that is It's in betting, but it's also in entertainment, in digital entertainment, and it was a sponsor of the shirt. Last year, the contract of the shirt finalized, but Bwin don't walk away. Bwin say, I am out of the shirt, but I want to be the official partner, sponsor of digital of Real Madrid.
Yep.
And that's happened after 5 years of effort, working with these guys, working with them, making the fantasy manager and showing to them and say, here you have insights, here you have information. I am not just sending you an email at the end of the campaign saying how many likes you have and how many comments. No, I am sending you a complete deck, telling you and informing you, this is the things that you do in the campaign. Maybe next time you have to do this to obtain more revenue or more results, stuff like that. That creates a different relationship with the partner. And that's why now, 5 years after that, after you start making all these social media that don't pay off, nowadays it's paying off because you have retained a sponsor that is paying you for this digital platform and because of these digital efforts that you are making that are not paying off. Now it's paying off after 5 years, So it's not money right now. It's not. I'm going to create an application and I'm going to make money all the days that usually. No, you have to think different. You are going to pay the value in some other different way. In the middle or long term.
Definitely. I think we're on the same page. I definitely think it is a long game and the thing that social allows you to do is it allows you to take your fans along to that journey, and then wherever you end up, they're already going to be there because they're going to be following you on all these different platforms that they're following you on now, and who knows, there might be a couple of platforms that are being built right now, whether that's in Silicon Valley or somewhere in Europe or even in Australia.
Yeah. This is called innovator's dilemma. It has happened in any industry. The innovation came in little segments, in little business models that doesn't work, that bring very little money, and that big companies don't pay attention to that. Obviously, they don't pay attention to that because the big money is in some other place. Football clubs don't pay attention nowadays to digital because they say, how much you're making? You're making maybe 20 million a year. I make 20 million signing just a deal with a sponsor.
Yep.
And they don't pay attention. The problem is when these social media, this digital, big transforming something big, and you are not prepared. That's what's happened. Name it. It has happened with the book industry, music industry. It has happened with the mining industries. With any industry when technology has entered, it has happened. It's something that is called innovation dilemma, and it's a concept that is around for many, many years. And now it's happening here. What's happening here, and it's going to happen. You have to be prepared. It's normal. It's normal that you don't. It's normal that marketing don't pay attention to you. It's normal that you are just 5 guys in digital, the 5 crazy guys in digital that no one's paying attention and no one's giving you budget. It's normal, But the thing is that they need to fight against this innovation dilemma. One big example and great example that do this 10 years ago and break the innovation dilemma in sports and now are making great is MLB. BAM, and MLB and BAM are a great example of breaking innovation dilemma and do break things for the Major League of Baseball in the States. Is a great example about this.
Exactly, and that gives me a good time to wrap up our discussion. I know we could talk longer, but I hope that our schedules allow us to catch up when I'm in Europe, and if not, I hope that you can make it down to Miami for seat, and maybe that's when we can continue this discussion.
Okay, I hope so.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Oscar. I'll have links to your Twitter handle, Oscar Ugaz, and your LinkedIn, so if anyone wants to catch up with you, they'll be in the show notes for this podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Sean. See you soon.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Oscar for joining me on the podcast all the way from France. Hopefully I'll catch up with him when I'm over in Europe. Just trying to organise our diaries to see if we can connect. But as I sort of said there in the conversation, we're also hoping that he can make it down to SEAT in Miami in July. So don't forget, you can still register for SEAT. Working on the digital track, spoke to Christine last week. It's really looks like it's going to be a really fun conference, and the agenda for the conference for both the digital, the CIO, the IT track, and also the CRM track run by guys like Russell Scibetti, I'll get Russell's name right, will be really good. And so hopefully we'll be able to get Oscar to come in and sit on a couple of the panels. So you can also check that out at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. And all the links to Oscar will be in the show notes. So definitely connect with him and follow what he does on Twitter and LinkedIn and the like. This week, also, we had an Olympian turn up to the Sports Geek offices, Dave Morris, who, if you have been following the Sochi Olympics, especially in Australia, he won the silver medal for the aerial skiing. He's a friend of one of the blokes, so we had a chat with him, and here's a little bit of a snippet from that chat. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties when recording, so it was recording on our backup track. So it's a little bit tinny, but he does give us some insights on what it's like when you are inundated with social media mentions and requests around a big event like the Olympics. Dave Morris, Olympian. So I had a question from a sports geek point of view. Mm-hmm. The London Olympics, the swimmers and the swimming team sort of blamed social media for their downfall in that they were reading too many tweets. Yep. It got in their head. So I guess you've just now lived that. What was it like in the lead up to? Like we've already said you were flying under the radar, but there would have been tweets coming in and stuff like that. Yeah. So what did you do to manage that? And then the second question is, what was it like afterwards?
The Australian Olympic Committee really learned from London and the mistakes that I say mistakes that the stuff that went wrong there. Like the social media got to a lot of athletes and it was very overwhelming. So they had what they called this year a media blackout, which is amped up a little bit more than it was. But it was basically they didn't want you tweeting or doing any social media while you're at your training venue, whether you're training or competing, which is very, very fair. People got all arced up about it. I'm like, but why would you want to be tweeting as you're ready to go down the end run? Like, you're just not concentrating. So
it was a security issue too, because there was some security issues. Yeah,
they don't want people saying, "Oh, I'm going to this bar," and then having anyone turn up. So I thought it was very fair. You're allowed to tweet and photos and whatever once you went back to your room and stuff. That's fine, but they just suggested that it was the best option to just stay totally away from it because you do get overwhelmed by it. And once I got the medal, I got the full brunt of social media in my face, and it was 3 whole days of basically non-stop, and there's no way I could have done that before my event if I'd had any exposure whatsoever, because I went under the radar, which is the plan, but guys like Chumpy and Tora and Lydia, they're like, bam, these guys are going to win. That's very overwhelming.
And that's the advice that I've given my clients, the sports teams. That I work with football clubs, and they get I just did a training session with the North Queensland Cowboys, and they get that intense pressure over 30 weeks.
Yes.
Over a 30-week season. So, if Jonathan Thurston has a good game, he gets a flood of tweets coming in. But what the Olympics, where they did make a mistake in London and, they needed to correct is, they tell you, don't read all the newspapers before you go out. And that's all obvious. But they weren't ready for this new media to say, don't listen, don't be tweeting until 12.
And I've had the internet trolls, and my brother helps manage my Facebook fan page. I've got people who are just hating on him. What have I done?
What did they say wrong?
He deletes it before I read it. He's like, I'm just going to save you from. Thank you very much. But I'm just like, what have I done to do that? But I take it as a compliment. Sometimes people look me up.
They've made fun of you, in your the fact that you're wearing the girls' uniform or something in your pants.
Well, that's the truth,
Oh, is it true?
Yeah, it's true. I had women's uniform for a couple of years. They didn't have a boys' one. If people want to,
were you having Matt Shirvington kind of trouble?
The camel toe.
So you mentioned your brother helps you with your Facebook fan page. Yeah. Do you run your Twitter and your Instagram accounts?
Yeah, I do my Instagram and Twitter, but Dad and my brother Pete and Josh help me out with that sort of stuff too, and it's nice to take the load off that. But I make sure I know what's going on. But in the games, I went, I'll read just a little bit of there because that's what I do on a daily basis. That's the routine. But I did really step back from it. I took my pictures as I normally would, but I left it all up until the end, and then once the medal was done, 980 emails the next morning.
Wow!
All right, here we go.
Learn from Sports Geek at our Sports Geek ODE one-day educational. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/ODE.
Thanks again to Dave Morris for coming into Sports Geek HQ. Again, apologies. kicking myself for the technical difficulties there with the audio, but I guess after 70 episodes, you're going to have one or two glitches every now and again, but just shows you, especially with audio and video, always have a backup and always have a secondary option. Otherwise, we would have lost it completely. So you can follow Dave at Aerial Skier on most platforms, and you can hear that episode in full at beersblokesbusiness.com, and you can get that on iTunes and Stitcher. But if you just go to Beers Blokes Biz on Twitter, you'll get the latest links for the show. This week's social media post of the week, and it's actually quite topical considering the conversation I had with Oscar around YouTube and some of the options in that space. YouTube have announced from a YouTube and Google Plus. I'm effectively using the two terms interchangeably. Google Plus with Google Hangouts, which is effectively a YouTube product, and I see it as a YouTube product. They've announced Google Plus Front Row with Manchester United, a means to bring fans from the digital space to Old Trafford. So I'll have a link to the show notes of Manchester United announcing that on Facebook and Google Plus, and the video that Google UK produced to promote the event. The fans will be able to dial in using Google Hangout, and they'll be actually shown on the front row at Old Trafford. So it's a really good way of connecting digital fans from an online point of view to the offline, to connect them to the stadium. So again, I think Google Hangouts, and we're seeing more and more teams doing them. I do think the invite only and the hand-picked fans is the way to go, and Manchester United is running effectively a competition to decide which fans will be in that front row. I think it's a really great way to engage your fans and bring them back. So I think, and everything that I'm seeing from what the Google Plus team and the Google Plus Sports team are doing, you saw it with the hashtag Sports Conference. They're really trying to push into that sports vertical. So if you haven't checked out Google Hangouts and how you could use them, I highly suggest you do, because I do think it is going to be, I guess, the one thing that may potentially come out of Google Plus. I'm not saying Google Plus is dead or it's the next platform to explode, but I definitely like Google Hangouts and the product that it offers in the YouTube space. So check that out, Google Plus Front Row with Manchester United. We don't want to run too long, trying to keep my episodes under 45 minutes. So that clock is ticking to tell me to dedicate episode 40. I did have a nomination for Steve Menzies, Manly Seagulls legend, coming back at the age of 40 to play in the Sevens tournament. I was going to talk about the 40-yard dash, considering it has been the NFL Combine recently, but as a Detroit Bad Boys Pistons fan, I can't go past one of the biggest bad boys in them all, Bill Laimbeer, especially since I was lucky enough to meet him on one of my earlier trips to Detroit and caught him at an airport and got his autograph. So I'll take a photo of that and put it in the show notes. So I'm going to dedicate this episode to Bill Laimbeer. You can get all the show notes, all the links of everything that was discussed today at sportsgeekhq.com/40. As is, you can track down and stalk, or I should say follow and connect with all the guests, over 50 now. Simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGP guests. And please look at the episode catalogue. Like I said, very proud to get to 40 episodes, and thank you for all the support, for all the people who have tweeted in, posted and replied that they are listening to the podcast. If I'm not getting that feedback, I won't be doing the podcast, is probably one way of putting it. It really does spur me on to continue to produce this episode. One example of that is from Richard from Canberra, who was asking about IFT. And one of the emails that I respond to when you sign up for Sports Geek News, if you go to sportsgeekhq.com, sign up now, I actually send you a few tips around how to use IFT. And he asked, is IFT more like a curation service? So IFT is IFTT.com. It's if this then that. I use it as a bit of a traffic controller and an archiver for all things social. So I'll put a link in the show notes to my IFT profile. It does things like automatically sending Instagram photos I like to my Dropbox, so I've got an archive of which photos I've liked. I'm also saving them in a Google spreadsheet, so if I want to reference them later, I might send them off to Tumblr. If I like a YouTube clip on YouTube, it will be sent to my Tumblr and things like that. So it's pretty much you set up a bunch of channels and then allows you to either archive or send those posts to other platforms. I use a lot with Instagram. I used a lot with YouTube, and just I use a lot from an engagement point of view. So if I'm engaged with a client, we want to keep a track of all the Instagram photos that are coming up around an event. I'll set up an if rule that will save all those likes, so we have a record of how many we liked and what pictures we liked and who, what type of users were sharing the photos of note. So one last thing, I did promise a special promo code for our one-day educational. For those of you in Melbourne, I'd love to see you there. Or if you know someone who's running a business, working in the social media or the marketing space and want to get a good feel for how they can use social media in their marketing mix, we'd love you to recommend and tell them about the Sports Geek one-day educational. So for this week, for this episode, I'm going to put out a promo code. The promo code is going to be Oscar. That will get you $50 off the registration price. So thank you for listening. I'm more than happy for you to pass that on. That promo code again is Oscar. And hope to see you there March 31 at Honey Bar. It'll be pretty much 4 really deep dive sessions of all the material that I've been using in sharing and training sports teams, but really I've looked to adapt it to any kind of business. So if you're looking to use social media for your business, or if you know someone who does need to do that, I'd love it if you could share it with them. Simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/ODE. You can get all the information there, find out about Josh and Steve, who are also going to be there, and talk about their experience in using social as well. Okay, time for the closing 2 cents. And we're going to dedicate this one to YouTube. YouTube is really ready to take on the sports market. A quick stat, over 6 billion hours of video are watched each month on YouTube. That's almost an hour for every person on Earth.
Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Give Beers, Blokes, and Business a listen, where Sean catches up with some savvy blokes. Listen to Beers, Blokes, and Business at beersblokesbusiness.com. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.
Now, I love what you've done with the name, by the way. Not the One Day International, the One Day Educational. Monday, 31st of March, 2014 at the Honey Bar. Check your local guides for more details. SportsGeekHQ.com is the place to go to find out a whole lot more about it.